Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to Ireland Bound. I know it's been a little bit. So much, way too much has been going on. Um, got new equipment. I had trouble with the new equipment trying to get it to work. Then I had a severe case of vertigo, which took me a while to recover. And, well, there's some other things. Seems like my health has been kind of like this lately. So, including the bout that I had here a few days ago with a severe reaction to cigarette smoke. I am highly allergic to cigarette smoke, and let's just say it put me down for a little bit. Well, today I'm feeling good, looking halfway decent. Anyways, but I'm feeling good, and I thought, you know what? Today's July the 4th. I'm off work today. I don't have to go in. I've got all day and 1,000 cats running around the house. But anyways, yeah, so I thought today would be a good day to do a video. I haven't done one in a while. I did a tattletale video for the last one. It was my mother on something she and my Uncle Johnny did. So now I'm going to do a tattletale video of my dad. This is a story I loved as a child. In fact, here just about a year ago, in fact, I had recounted this tale to one of my, well, at least one of my nephews. So this is kind of almost like a retelling of a retelling of a retelling, but I wanted to share it with y'all because it kind of speaks to a more innocent time. Like I said, today is July the 4th. I'm hoping that I will be able to have this video up before the end of the day, so hopefully it will be on July 4th when it will be seen. I mean, a great day of freedom to talk about the freedoms that we had back years ago, that even more freedoms that my dad had as a child. Now, if y'all remember the video I did on him, I told you he was born 1921. Okay, yes, he would have been way over 100 years old by now. But he was born 1921. He, of course, grew up in the 30s, the 20s, in the 30s. Excuse me. I have a little bit of hiccups here. That's I usually don't get hiccups. Anyways, he grew up in the 20s. He grew up in the 30s, and he grew up in an area that is known as the Everman, Rendon, and Kennedale area. Oh, hello, honey. One of my kitty cats sitting here pushed up against me. She was cleaning herself. I was like, what in the world? It's just a cat. Anyways, my dad grew up in an area of South Fort Worth known as Rendon, Everman, and Kennedale. He was born in Kennedale, but he grew up a lot in the Rendon and Everman area. So the three of them are kind of interchangeable almost because of the fact of how close they are. In fact, most of my dad's family at one point lived in the area. So there was a lot of people that he knew in the area. Well, my dad his mother was the second oldest child of 10 kids. He had a lot of cousins. He had a whole lot of cousins. In fact, I have a box of pictures that a lot of them are his cousins from when they were younger, but that's something else I'll have to go through at a later point, a later time. So, my dad, like I said, he grew up on the branches of a creek, and Village Creek. That was the name of it. Took me a moment. I hadn't thought of that name in a while. But anyways, he grew up on the shores of the Village Creek down there in the area he lived in. And the road that he grew up on was a road called Wilson Road. His mother was a Wilson, and at one point There was no one that lived on that road that was not related to the Wilsons in one way or another. They were either one of the Wilsons themselves, like one of the... What are you doing? Just my water bottle. One of my cats is being ornery. He shoved my water bottle off the thing. Don't worry, the water bottle's fine. It survived. It was a short drop for it. Anyway, so she was one of the Wilsons, and on Wilson Road, it was like no one but Wilson kids. Sorry, my hair shifted and I didn't like the shift. Okay, but anyway, so they lived on Wilson Road, like I said, it was the Wilson kids, their kids, ones that they raised, all lived up and down the road. Now, I don't think you could find a Wilson on that road if you tried. It's changed a whole lot since my dad's time. But he lived on it, and of course all of his cousins, he played with them all the time. There was kids all up and down the road, and they'd all get together and they'd go down to the creek, they'd do all this stuff. Well, they were typical children of the 1920s and the 1930s. They had games they played, they had stuff they did. They had plenty of stuff to explore. Well, someone found this old kind of shed down close to the creek there. And of course, being boys, they explored it, and it was like, oh, hey, this is a cool place. We need to come down here. We need to hang out here. We need to have fun here. And so they kind of made it their little clubhouse. That's where they go to have fun. Well, I think he said there's about 5 of his boy cousins. I say boy cousins because he had girl cousins too, and the girl cousins would have been hanging out with boy cousins. They would have been sitting there in their nice little pretty dresses, having tea parties. No, not these boys. They did not hang around having tea parties. Sorry, kitten trying to walk through me there. Being a rotten kitten too. Go away. Go hang out with your brother. Here. There. All right. Give him someone to play with other than me. So anyways, he and about 5 of his boy cousins that he hung out with regularly, they decided they were going to go down to their little shed clubhouse, their little wine shack, whatever you want to call it, and they were going to do an overnight trip. But they knew that their mamas would not allow that if the mamas knew. So they're like, okay, what can we do? So it's like my dad said he was sleeping over at this aunt's house, and these boys said they were sleeping over at this aunt's house or this uncle's house, and they just basically traded out, quote unquote, nights at everybody else's house. Everybody was sleeping at somebody else's house, but they weren't sleeping at any of their houses. None of them. So they they got all their camping stuff ready. They got some stuff together. Of course they were sleeping over, so I mean, grabbing their pillow and a blanket, and taking off. Who's going to be the wiser? They're going over to this relative's house, so they need to take some stuff with them, to be able to be comfortable. These boys were brilliant. These boys are absolutely brilliant. So they got all their stuff together. They, of course, snuck out some food without telling their parents. And so they said, we got all this stuff. We don't want to have to carry it. So they each roped a cow. They couldn't get horses, so they got cows. They got their stuff loaded on, and it was, of course, a hot summer day, probably a lot like how we're having a hot summer right now. So it was a hot summer day, and being boys, they decided, I love tails coming through my camera. Being boys, they decided, what we really need to do? Let's strip down. My dad said that all the boys took all their clothes off, and of course they, shoved them into bags and stuff like this, and they rode the cows naked down to the river. Yeah, said everything was going just fine. The cows were just going along. Of course they start slowing down. They kick them a little bit. The cows get forward. Well, at some point, one of the cows got a little frisky. It got a little frisky, did a little bucking, and bucked one of the cousins off into a fence, a barbed wire fence. Oh, my dad told me that. I mean, I've touched barbed wire. I've accidentally scraped my arm against it, my shoulders and stuff, being a kid, being outside and stuff. And I know what that felt like, and I'm sitting here thinking, ow. This one cousin got thrown into a barbed wire fence. And I looked at my dad. I said, well, did you take him back to his mother? He said, no, we just continued on down to the shack. I'm like, oh my word. It's like, okay, y'all were definitely a different generation. I don't know what they did about, of course, his scratches and stuff. They probably didn't do anything at all, but they went down there and they spent their night down there in the line shack, and they had them a great time acting like little boys and doing the things that little boy cousins do, just hanging out, and probably did a little fishing. They might, boys back then did a lot of fishing, so they probably had some fishing line. They probably went fishing a little bit. Yeah, I kept picturing my dad sitting here talking about what they're doing, and I kept thinking, a barbed wire fence. Oh, I'm sitting here. I didn't know how he got thrown into it. Might have landed on his side on it. He might have gotten flipped over and landed on his back on the fence. I mean, there's so many ways it could have happened. Oh my word. Yeah, I just kept thinking the boys back then. It's like, yeah, no, I can't imagine a boy nowadays saying, hey, let's get that cow and ride it naked down to the creek. Of course, back then, there was a lot more open pasture land too. And nowadays it'd take like 5 minutes to walk down to most creeks, because there's not that far of a distance to go with it. Yeah, a little bit of ingenuity, because they thought to use a cow. So they had the ingenuity to use a cow. You have the forethought to be over, for everybody to be over at someone else's house. It's like, okay, Willard, you be over at Aunt Ida. Joe, you be over at Uncle Albert, and just kind of going through and just deciding who was going to be at who else's house. Of course, back then they didn't have telephones, so it couldn't have been like Grandma would have called up her sister, Ida, how are the boys doing? They just had to take it for granted that the boys were probably there, which they weren't. But anyways, like I said, I thought that was a cute story. It's kind of a fun little one. The mischief the kids would get into. They were always doing things. They did Indian wrestling, which my dad ended up beating his cousin Jack a lot. Now, Jack was bigger than all the other boys, but my dad managed to keep him in his place. So he was always beating Jack in Indian wrestling. I asked Jack one time, I said, okay, Jack, I said, how did he do it? Did he really, how did he do it? He just looked at me, he goes, I don't know, he just beat me every time. He says, I don't know how he did it. And I'm like, seriously? It's like, you didn't win at least once? And he's like, nope. Says, your dad was just so much better at Indian wrestling. So, like I said, the little mischief things that they did, I know, just kind of a little added bonus story, just to add to it. Back in the 20s and 30s, the story of Little Orphan Annie was a pretty big thing in the comic strips. And so my dad and some of his cousins, they always played the game. I'd ask him, I said, well, who played Annie? Says, oh, we had an imaginary Annie. Says, we didn't have anybody that was being Annie. Says, we would just make up stuff about her being there, and what she was doing. Said, but we didn't have anyone who was an actual Annie. But my dad always played Punjab. If you've seen any of the Annie movies or know anything about Annie, Punjab was the big Indian Sikh. The one that had the big turban. He had the long, big sword. The big skidamar, I think is what it's called. I might have the terminology wrong. If I do, I apologize. But excuse me. But anyways, yeah. So my dad always was Punjab. And one of his cousins, of course, would play Daddy Warbucks, and someone else would be Asp, the Oriental chauffeur, I think is what he was. They had different people. A couple of them would be the bad guys, trying to get to Annie or trying to do something. So they had a lot of imagination back then. They had a lot of fun. There was a lot of stuff they did that, like I said, he used to tell me all sorts of stories, but those are two of them that really stick out in my mind, and something I thought my nieces and nephews and some of my cousins from this side of the family might appreciate hearing. Might like knowing something that some of their relatives did back, 100 years ago on a hot summer day. But anyways, I didn't really have anything else. I wanted to tell that story. And by the way, we are at this point, 98 days away from Ireland. 98 days, and I will be over there, and I will be filming, hopefully, a ton of videos. So until then, I hope everybody has a great holiday. If you go see fireworks, enjoy, be safe, and I will talk to everybody later. Bye.